All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 365 deep dive. We've got a bit of a special show today, and we're doing things a little bit differently. If you've ever watched one of our shows, you'll know that we like to try things out for the first time in front of a live audience. So I appreciate you being patient with us, being a couple minutes overdue. But I want to bring Andy and our special guest on screen here at the same time because they are live from Seattle together in person for the first time. So I'm going to bring you guys up. Hey, Michaela. Hey, Andy. How's it going?
Hello, it's going good.
Good. You
We are
guys sound good. Awesome. So you guys are in Seattle at a conference right now. Can you tell us a little bit about how the week's been going?
Yeah, so we're here at 365 EduCon in Seattle. It's going really well. It's been a long week, a lot of information, a lot of workshops, a lot of breakout sessions. Crowd here has been awesome. It's really been engaging. I've had a lot of fun. You've had a couple of really busy days here. Few
Very
sessions,
busy. Yeah.
Ask the Experts.
Oh, yeah. Lots of list questions coming in at the AMA the other day. You had some workshops too. You did two or?
Yeah, two workshops.
Two workshops.
Yeah,
Wow.
few breakout sessions. Yeah.
Wow. Were they half-day workshops or full day?
Full day workshops.
Full day. Wow. So you did one on Copilot, right? Kind of getting ready for Copilot. What was the other one?
Yeah, did a workshop getting ready for Copilot, and then business process automation with Power Apps and Power Automate, where we lean heavily on Microsoft Lists.
Very cool. So, and that's the subject of today's deep dive is Microsoft Lists. We had a really great opportunity come up by, having Andy and Michaela together for a week in Seattle that we could bring on like the utmost expert in Microsoft Lists, the name and face of lists ever since I've been hearing about lists from the likes of like Mark Cashman talking about it on the Intra Zone, things like that. We're really excited to have you on today. And we're going to deep dive into lists, a lot of the myths that you've been hearing about lists, questions that people on the chat have about lists, and then go into some of the exciting new stuff that will be coming very soon or has launched recently. We got a little bit of a treat that Michaela has given us access to her tenant in the Microsoft like early ring area. And because we've got a Microsoft person here, we're going to get to show things that aren't quite GA yet and not break our NDAs and lose our MVP status. So that will be a good thing. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be great. You got a lot of love for Microsoft Lists in the chat. I've been using Lists for, ever since it launched, and then the traditional SharePoint list before that. So I'm really excited about this topic. We've got a lot of past with it. So
for those that are meeting you for the first time, Michaela, why don't you do a kind of a brief interview or introduction, tell everybody a little bit about yourself. And we've had a little bit of fun. We want to bring up just a little bit mastering integration, collaboration, efficiency, innovation, lists, and execution. Michaela, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've watched a lot of these that you guys have done. And so when I got to meet you guys in person, oh man, when did I meet you? Probably 2 years ago, a year ago, maybe.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to be here. So for those who aren't familiar, I'm Miceile Barrett, and I'm on the Microsoft List team. And this is a product where actually I started my career at Microsoft 7 years ago on this product. Like John mentioned, back when it was kind of this piece of SharePoint that not many people knew about. That was the first team that I had joined. And so now I've kind of expanded the products that I work on at Microsoft, but List is the one that I keep coming back to, and the one that I think is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have inside of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I live here in Seattle. I work out of the Redmond office. I actually live about a mile away from where we are now. So this worked out super well for me that the conference was here so we could hang out as much as we could and get this recorded in live together, which I absolutely love. And so, yeah, with Microsoft Lists, I feel like there's kind of been like a story arc since I joined. And I joined back in 2016. And, it all started with this first launch of like modernizing is what we called it back in 2016. And since then, we've just taken the product through so many improvements where we've kept the power of lists, but we've added easy functionality on top of it so that you can use the power without feeling like you need to have some type of like degree in JSON or feel like you need to know all these secrets inside of it. With that being said, there's still some kind of gotcha moments that we're going to walk through today because I live and breathe this product. And I build it for my career. But when I come to conferences like this, it's humbling to see folks like Andy and John, where they have even more tips and tricks than what I have. And so it's really cool to connect with customers and be able to actually see like all the different things I can learn from you guys as well. So drop anything in the chat. I am here to answer all the questions. And if I don't know, someone from my team will definitely know. And we can either ping them behind the scenes or reach out to you afterwards.
So I know I'm really excited for this one. I know we want to like go ahead and dive in.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be kind of cool just like at the beginning, just some real world application, like some practical uses of Microsoft Lists. I know for me, it's core to a lot of what I do for business processes. So like do Microsoft user adoption and training for a large organization, and lists actually make all that possible, whether it's like documenting things like our office hours where we work one-on-one to like troubleshoot. We use Microsoft Lists to like for all of our meeting notes, and it's connected to the booking service so that we have all the information for the customer already in the list, name, dates, links to the meeting, and then we can filter by the product, the main topic that we were talking about. We can take the notes, we have their questions, and then we can use all of that information to identify trends and maybe head things off in our training versus users running into these pain points down the road. Another thing that we use it for that's been super helpful is our webinars. So we schedule all of our webinars with Teams webinars, but I have to draft titles and descriptions, and then there's presenter links and attendee links, and then there's dates and times and durations. All of that's actually tracked through Microsoft Lists. And we've connected that to Power Automate so that when I decide which sessions are going live, Power Automate publishes it to our corporate intranet via email, a couple of Teams channels, a couple of Viva Engage community channels, and it helps us to just automate the process of broadcasting what's actually up and coming for us. And then we put all of this in a learning site. So it's a communication site, and it's heavy in video, but we're using the stream playlist now in Microsoft Lists, the playlist template.
I love that one.
That's great for like putting all the videos together and kind of giving that almost YouTube-like experience for the video playback. So we're definitely leveraging that. And then John and I did a deep dive a couple months ago where we're trying to like create a subscription service so users can subscribe to like notifications and like receive like follow-ups, and building it on Microsoft Lists. So those are just a couple of ways that I know I use it. I think John had a couple of examples that he wanted to share as well.
Yeah, I've got three that come to mind that we've used Lists for recently that were very successful. One is my organization, very large, 400,000 person organization. We're joining a early access program for a very popular feature that's coming out, imminently, and we need to collect feedback and potential issues and biases and things like that are coming out of that early access program for our very limited set of users. And so we're collecting that feedback as a Microsoft List right now. The way we're doing that is we've got a form that says, hey, leave us feedback. We want to hear, how this product is working out for you. And then we're taking that feedback, and then using Power Automate, we're adding it to a Microsoft List, assigning it to a point person, who will reach out, get more information. It goes to the appropriate parties, whether it's us in IT or maybe somebody from InfoSec or HR, something like that, because you have different responsibilities, right, for the type of issues and incidents that come in. Another thing we're doing in that community is building a new prompt library. As people get better with prompt engineering and we're making a concerted effort to upskill, we thought, well, let's crowdsource some of the things that work better than others. And as people discover new ideas for how to do like better prompts against AI, they can add it to the list. And then that list, we're using the rating functionality. So we have a rating column where people can like or basically upvote the prompts that they like the best. We put a default sorting, so the most popular are at the top. Added that as a team tab in our channel for that, where they can leave ideas, they can leave things like that. We're kind of building like a library up, so better prepare the organization, kind of have like a knowledge base created. And then the third one that worked out really well for me in my past life was when we made our initial move to Microsoft 365 back at Cerner. That was a new introduction into SharePoint. We were moving away from other systems into SharePoint. How do we get people using it and kind of show the art of the possible? And we found out in our old enterprise social media platform that was called Jive, the most popular group, as much as you want it to be all business focused, the most popular group was the buying and selling group, the classified ads. So what we did is myself and my friend Sarah Schooler, we built a Microsoft list as a classified listings and then launched that as, look, it's the replacement, it's better, you can search and get alerts. But then what was really cool was showing the mobile interface for that to say, hey, the demo I went through was, I want to sell this electronic I've got. I could pull out the List mobile app and I could add a new item to the classified list, take pictures with my phone of it, and list it up there for thousands of people to be able to, buy my, fancy camera from me. So those are just 3 different instances that I've used Microsoft Lists in the past to, great effect. So I'm curious in the chat, as you guys have ideas and things you've been using Lists for the past couple years since it's been out, put those in the chat and we'll flash those on screen too.
So what about you? What are some of your uses for Microsoft Lists, as you are the maestro of Microsoft Lists?
I actually feel like I need to take that prompt library idea, because right now the way that we're handling that scenario, as Copilot and ChatGPT and Bing Chat are just exploding, is I just kind of message my coworkers like, hey, try this, try that. And I think if we stored it in the list, it would actually be so much easier to have like a source of truth for all those different ideas that we have. So I'm going to take that back to my team. I'm excited for that one. Okay. So within my life, I use lists almost like they're so ingrained into the workflow that I have, that I was sitting here thinking of all the different scenarios. Like I mentioned, I work at Microsoft. I'm a product manager, and a lot of my day-to-day job is actually trying to coordinate what 30 to 50 engineers are doing and working towards a goal, and that goal is building Microsoft Lists. So this is really meta, but we use lists to track that process, and so that's probably the most. That list is just always up in my life. And so what it has is a list of, maybe a couple hundred either feature ideas, feedback, bugs, all these different things. And we use kind of like that ownership as well as views to break down like what's pending, what's blocking for actually rolling out, what's something that we can fix later. And that's the type of list that I have always on just up. But then within my broader team, like with what my management uses, we use List at Microsoft for a wide range of things. And one of the most kind of awesome experiences for me is when a partner team, that I need help from, maybe I need them to do something for me, or I need to connect with their APIs that they're building. They will send me a form and be like, you need to submit this list item to get kind of on our backlog. And I absolutely love that, because it shows that other teams are using kind of the product that we're needing their help on. And so a couple examples of that is a lot of our notification systems are a partner team. And so I just go into the list they've set up and I type in the request that I need, kind of similar to what you're describing, John, where it's like any issue that I have, any feature ask that I have, I submit it to them. They have automation set up, so they immediately get that email notification. They send me back an automation saying, yes, we've received your ask. Please wait like a day and we'll get back to you. And so that's the way that we actually build any sort of notification integration, is all through that single list. And then the other way that my peers use lists, as well as myself, is we have frequent meetings, kind of similar to the webcasting you were describing. We have meetings that repeat once a week, maybe once a month. And we use a list with the calendar view to kind of keep track of different topics And then the owner of that meeting will go through in the list each week or each month and kind of prioritize and pick which one they want to use for the upcoming meeting. And once they kind of select, like, this is going to be the topic, it sends out the automation to the entire meeting invite, to our team. And it sends it in Teams and email to say, like, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about in this weekly meeting. Please join if you're interested, or if this isn't relevant to you, don't worry, you can skip it. And so that is so helpful for me, because that's hours of my day sitting in meetings. And so I love getting those automations being like, this is the topic, this is who's speaking. And if it's something that I'm not needed for, or something that I'm not going to be sitting in on, it saves me that hour not having to be there. And then additionally, we use the list to track our budget for traveling. So if you are a Microsoft employee on ODSP, the OneDrive and SharePoint team, you submit through a list to get budget to go to conferences like this. And there's so many more examples, but basically the way that my team and my org works is you log in and you open up the list app, and like that is where the day starts. And so that's kind of a breakdown of how we use it. And my ultimate goal is to make lists better. So we're using lists to make lists better. We do dog food all of our own stuff. So almost any scenario where a list could be used, we do it.
So you've opened up the can of worms. You mentioned lists and calendar. So I know there's going to be some questions coming up around that.
Yes.
But I think this is a good point where we're describing all of this. Let's go ahead and bring it up, and let's actually get into the hands-on portion. John, you want to share Michaela's screen?
Absolutely, yeah. So along the lines of using lists for lists, we thought we would be real meta and cute and use lists to drive this live stream as well. So you guys put a ton of work in the other day to load up a lot of the myths that you've been hearing, or things that people probably want to know. And we're going to track that through this list and address each of those, and then kind of mark them as we've reviewed those items. So that'll be a fun way to do it.
It's not just like misconceptions and like myths. Like, there's a lot of functionality that we've got in this list that people might not be aware of. And part of what we want to do is to showcase like all the different things that we can do. Or if maybe you had an experience with the SharePoint list years ago, to showcase how the product has evolved, and some of the things that we're going to be able to take advantage of that you might not have known that existed previously, to get you over some of those pre-existing pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, using lists to coordinate my life is not foreign to me. This was very natural. This was very natural for me to set up. I feel right at home here now.
So what are we looking at here? This one looks a little bit different than the list that I've been working with in some of the demos for the last couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at here is we're in the Microsoft List app. And I don't actually see this question coming in, but I might have missed it. I usually get this whenever we're at a conference or talking to customers. And I think we take some time to tackle it right up front. A lot of people are familiar with a SharePoint list, or maybe you use List in Teams, and then you're seeing this purple app that I have here. And I want to just kind of right off the bat say that a list is a list is a list. The experience that we had inside of SharePoint is consistent with everything that you're going to see here. And to give a little bit of backstory, one of the ways that I like to describe this is kind of similar to how OneDrive was born. This is how Microsoft List app was born, where we had SharePoint and you could create these really powerful lists or documents, but they were all within a shared space. There wasn't really this concept of personal ownership. And we had feedback for years of, I want to lock down my list so no one can see it until I'm kind of like done making it perfect. And then I want to share it out. And then I want people to collaborate. So similar to how, OneDrive lets you create files in kind of your own personal space. For those on the call that have been with us for a while, you might call it a Miceile. That's actually what List does as well inside of the Microsoft List app. So you can go ahead and create a document that lives inside of your personal space, and then you can share it out. And so all the functionality that I'm showing is consistent across Teams, SharePoint, the web part, mobile, right? It's the same actual back end, the front end we're bringing along with us. I am on the List team, and I use the native Microsoft List app or the PWA usually. So I will just demo out of this because that's what I love, and I hope that you guys all give it a try. It also has the fastest perf here. So what we're looking at here is something that we started launching 2 days ago, actually, which was perfect with the this conference. And I was doing the keynote where we were demoing lists, and it was super exciting. A little stressful. I think I mentioned in the keynote, I showed up about 20 minutes late because we were launching the products that morning. And I was like, we have to get this out so I can go on stage and say, like, your tenants might actually be seeing this now. And so what we're doing with this kind of update is really trying to make the visuals easier to understand and look at so that you know what content's showing in your list. And so the things that I want to point out that you'll notice here is really these like view tabs up here. You'll notice that there's no view drop-down menu. You'll notice we have a couple of these buttons here that weren't there before. We're going to walk through those later. And then additionally, you just kind of see a different UI, different pixels on the screen. So you'll notice kind of like these bars over here, a new selection model. And as we go through this list that we have here, you'll start to kind of notice that it's the same list that we love, but with a lot of reduced noise on the screen. And so that was kind of our goal here. And like I mentioned, we are in 2% of targeted release tenants. So if you don't see it, no worries. We're starting off small. As you know, we like to roll out through different stages so that we can catch any issues before we go to GA. So everything that I'm showing is rolling out, hopefully reaching GA by the end of the month. But I wanted to take this opportunity to show what's coming as opposed to what's existing, because there's not a lot of content out there for what's coming new. You know, we're going to update our support articles, and we have a couple of, you know, recorded pieces out there, but this will be the pod, or the series actually shows this new UI in depth. So I wanted to take the time to actually do that since you guys gave it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have one question about the UI.
Yeah.
And this is going to be very, very simple, but the selection circle, what is the technical name for that? Is it a check circle? Is it a check box? Is it the selection circle? Like, what is the name for the thing that we use to select the line item on the left-hand side of the item's title?
This guy, we call it the selection circle.
The selection circle.
Yeah, and we toggle between, across Microsoft, we toggle between a selection circle and a selection box. A box is square, the circle has the...
Nice. I'll burn that into my brain now.
It really makes a huge difference in the product.
So for those of you that are joining in or watching this later, what do you call the selection circle to?
I would love to know. Yeah.
That's one that's always I've fumbled in trainings and talking about this. Like, it's click on the selection or the checkbox, but it's a circle, and so it's like, okay, this sounds. So I wanted to know, like, internally, like what you were referring to it as. So we'll go with selection circle for now. But if anybody has anything clever, like meatball menu.
It's not as fun as the waffle or the hamburger menu.
The waffle is, the waffle is good. We're dog fooding the waffle. I love when I say that sentence. People not in tech are like, what does it mean? The selection circle is what I call it. And my team will all know exactly what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with the selection circle for now. We'll see if we what we have, maybe a poll at the end of the talk today, and we'll see kind of where we go. So let's dive right in. Are we going to work from the list top to bottom, or? Yeah,
let's do that.
Okay.
I sorted it. As you can see, I kind of sorted it based on this category. We have a couple of different categories going on here, and we could work top to bottom, or we could dive in really wherever. Before we get started, though, I do want to add in a rating column so that as you know, John, Andy, and myself are in here, we can actually go through and rate some of these items. If there's a bunch of questions that come up at some time, maybe that has a lot of ratings going on. And this is actually one of the first new things that we're going to show here. Oh, hang on, my thing timed out. Let me refresh. Okay, there we go. So one of the newest things that we have coming out here is actually the ability to create a rating column in the modern UI. Now, for those that have been around in the product for a while, we have actually had a rating column underneath the hood of our product where it has sat inside of our classic UI for years. But we wanted to bring it into the experience that we see today, make it something that you can create from that plus menu. And then as I make it, you'll actually see that we have a bunch of new UI on it so that it looks a little bit more modern. And so actually, if you guys want to go in, we could just test it out on this first item. You can throw in your rating, and then it'll give you a breakdown of all the different average ratings that you see.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it
That's
really
nice. It's nice just to get it from lists because, as you said,
Yep.
like I had to jump out to SharePoint from Teams and add it that way, and configure it there. It's nice to be able to do it from lists, and then a roll up like that is really cool. Let me refresh
I
mine.
love it. And like I said, in those scenarios that I described on using lists, and you even described the rating column that you had to kind of build manually, but we've been using this to kind of stack rank like what topic is most interesting. And then, like you said, sort by it, put the top rated things on the most the highest of the list, and then you just run down it based on rating. And so I'm gonna add this in here, and as we go, we can keep rating. You see here we got another rating added in there, which we see 50% on the stars. So I absolutely love it. This is one of the new features that I had to do before we even got started.
I really like that when you hover over, you get the analytics stuff of it. I think that's actually a really nice addition to it. And I've done some of this in the modern UI, but I've had to do it through conditional formatting and JSON. There's some community samples that are out there, and like you basically make like a number field, and based off of the number, it fills in the number of stars. So this is way more approachable for the end user, and you get the analytics. That's just the icing on top of the cake right there.
Yeah, and then if you guys were paying close attention, you notice it's 2 clicks, right? You click add new, and then you select or 3 clicks, I'm sorry. You click add new, you pick the rating, and then you just add it, which is super awesome. And now, I mean, I hate to go out of order, but I feel like we're going to kind of have to address the elephant that people are seeing on the screen. You guys are seeing these kind of like presents jumping around. So I feel like we might need to go in and actually kind of break down what's happening. So you can look here, Grady. We have Andy's Grady, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got Andy signed in as Grady, and I mean, I am not refreshing. You're watching my hands up here. So we see that he's typing in this spot. I'm getting all these updates live without refreshing the screen. And so this is such a powerful improvement that we're bringing to the product so that I am never out of date and I don't have to worry about constantly refreshing, especially in a list where collaboration is the point of the list usually. And so it makes it so much nicer. And then up here, you'll see we have kind of a little face pile here. So I can see that Grady's in the list. I can see that Alan's in the list. And we just added this contact card. So you can actually drop down and, this is the contact card that we have across all of Microsoft 365. Again, we're in a demo account. These are profiles I haven't built out exclusively, but you'll see some AI on top of these where it shows you kind of like recent collaboration that you've had. And, I think it's just, I absolutely love it. We should go in, you should make the real-time editing and updates reviewed and say that it's true. We have it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, the people pills at the top there, is that like Word and PowerPoint and Excel where it will show not only who's there but where they are? And can you like jump to the cell where they're editing, or does it just show that they're present?
So up here, it just shows that they're in the list, and then to see where they're editing, we have this kind of box around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually
cool.
a really
and they're
cool.
color coordinated.
Color coordinated. You got the abbreviation, and hover kind of shows you more detail. But that's a really cool piece of feedback because I do use that feature all the time in Word where you can like jump down to where they are. So hopefully for us to consider.
So I'm just going in, updating a couple of the columns that we've reviewed. So
oh, there they are. Yeah.
Yep, coming through. Now I want to point out one other thing while we're here and we're doing this collaborating on this. We're in the grid view like right away. Like refresh the list and like right away we're able to approach all the different rows, all the different columns, and we didn't have to switch into the grid view to get into that. So is that the default?
We are moving towards that. For folks who are more familiar, it used to be called Quick Edit, and we renamed it to Grid View when we started heavily investing in the inline editing experience. And what we are launching, we're not gonna change anyone's existing list, of course. We never want to do that. But we're starting kind of slow. So if you create a blank list or you create a list from Excel, we're gonna put it in the Grid view by default so that you can start editing in line. And the reason that we're doing that is based on a lot of user research that we've had, where getting started is easier when you can just start typing, as opposed to kind of going in and having to create these new items with like kind of like a button up here, then it adds in the list. And so we had been getting that feedback for probably 2 or 3 years from people at conferences and user studies and our data. And so this is kind of our first step to truly commit to that inline editing experience as a priority.
So I really like this experience, like just being able to get right in without a whole lot of friction
amazing.
to like start editing. Like we're doing demos and like it was natural. Like I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding ratings to this. I'm gonna add a note. I'm gonna see if I can put in an emoji in the notes field. I'm gonna go over here and start, updating the review field. And I didn't have to double click to edit. I didn't have to go to the grid mode. Like so really reduce the friction to get started. But one of the things on our list there that I do want to call out is so we go into this edit mode, can we edit in line with the group by option enabled? Because we use a lot of views, filtering and sorting and grouping. So are we going to be able to do the grid view with the group by view enabled?
Yes. This is a myth that we are busting. I don't know if we can even call it a myth because it was fact for a while. You can go into a feature inside of Microsoft Lists where when you have data, you can kind of group by those data containers. And one of let me just do it actually, why talk about it. So I'm going to group by category. As you see, we kind of have this category column over here with automate, collab, creation. So I'm going to go ahead and group by that one. And so you see it puts it into this kind of breakdown here. So I can quickly look at what I got going on. Now, I really want to point out that I did not leave the grid mode. I can go in and I can keep editing these. Maybe I put like update the owner. I don't want to update the category because those are actually set. Like I could go in and update this while I'm in the group by mode. And honestly, this has been a feature that I've personally been just waiting for. I was waiting for myself to build it, I guess. But it's just so much easier when you have this list and my team always groups by everything. Like it doesn't matter what the list is for. It's always in a group. And it drives me crazy that I couldn't just go in and like quickly update or quickly add an item. So this is probably one of the biggest product improvements that we're bringing. When I combine
I really just love seeing all the group by in one area, because one of the struggles that I have with lists is trying to figure out which things I can group by and having to go like column by column, be like, nope, I can only filter, I can't group. Having all of them listed there is really nice. It saves a lot of clicks.
It definitely does. And that's part of kind of this new UI that we're talking about here. Previously, if you wanted to add grouping, you had to kind of you had to put a column in your view, drop down in that column header, and then apply group by. And I just saw a question come in saying, what happens if you need to group by 3 levels? That's a great question. So we support, we call it nested grouping. We support nested grouping up to 2 levels. There's not a way that I can think of out of the box to do 3 levels. And if you want to add the nested levels, we are going to build out a functionality right here in this menu where you see I'm grouped by category, and then I could click owner. So to do category and then a sub-nesting of owner. It's not built yet. It's not rolled out to my build. So I'm not going to demo it. It'll come a little bit later in the product. If you want to turn it on though, you can go into those classic settings, as much as I hate saying those words, but to unblock you can go into the classic settings and enable that. But part of what John called out, having this like single entry point for group by, is to give the visibility into like what columns do I have that I can group by? Can I group by multiple? And it kind of adds that flexibility into the space that people have been asking for. So 2 levels, we call it nested grouping. Not 3 levels yet, but I love that there's an appetite for 3 levels. That would be something cool to think about.
Just to inject another question, there was a question a little bit earlier on about when we were talking about the column types, and adding a rating column. The attachment or a file type of column, has there been any thoughts about making that more of like a live connection to an object that's in SharePoint or OneDrive, rather than having to attach and kind of, basically now you've got like this sharded file that you have to re-upload if it changes, something like that? What would you recommend around having a more connected experience there?
That is such a good question, and it's such a common use case. We have made a lot of improvements to the attachment field, and they're a little bit a little bit maybe geeky improvements, but they have greatly reduced a lot of friction that we see with the attachment field. So let me go ahead and actually, if you go to the column, if you go to the crate here, you see add attachments. And the improvements that we've made have not been super UI focused just yet. But what we have done is when you actually create an attachment, what it's doing is we will create a folder in the site assets of the site that this is in. So if this is a list that's in a team site, then it's actually created in kind of like the site assets. So in this example, when I start adding attachments, you'll start seeing a Listbusters folder, and then you'll have all of those attachments. And so that organization structure, one, is great. And then it acts like a document in there, right? Because then you can go in, you can share it and interact with it. The second thing that we've done is really improved the naming structure. Because when you add an attachment, at least back in the day, and you like maybe deleted one or added duplicate ones, we had a really hard time dealing with the naming structure. So we've simplified that so that the naming comes up as like the actual name of the file. And then if you upload multiple, or say you delete and then re-upload, we just do like a normal like 1, 2, 3, 4. We just count them for you so that you see what's going on. And so related to this, we actually brought the image field into that same technical space. So when you upload an image, it's doing the same thing as the attachment field, which makes the consistency just absolutely amazing. And again, making those improvements so that if you go in and say that you like delete an image, but then you re-upload it. Before, we kind of had a really hard time dealing with that. And it was confusing if you ever tried to find that image in your SharePoint site. So we've updated the name so you at least recognize what you've uploaded. Now, with that all being said, one of the things that I think is a really cool use case is when you add attachments into list items, and we support multiple attachments per item now. And we also support, this is one kind of like a myth here that I want to share. You can upload files that are up to 250 megs. And so that is kind of a limit that sometimes people hit, and it's not super widely published. And so I just want to make sure that folks listening here are aware that that is something that we have in the product as kind of a limitation there.
Okay.
And to kind of reiterate, we were talking about this the other day. So there's going to be some of this is going to tie over into a folder in the site assets library. Will there be a visual indicator other than the folder name that is associated with a Microsoft list? Because I can see somebody going through site contents and like, why are all of a sudden there are a ton of like extra things in my site assets folder? And
for sure,
maybe they want to do some spring cleaning and they're like, well, you know, they start pulling things out and then don't realize that maybe that's connected to a Microsoft list. I can see my end users doing that. So would there be some kind of identifier beyond just the folder that it's in that's associated with the list?
There will be a path. So in the site contents, there's kind of that like path as to like where that lives, whether it's a news post, a file, a folder. So it'll show the list name. But that actually isn't, you know, like giving the scenario that you're describing, like there could be a document library called Listbusters, right? It's not super crisp that it's a list. So no, we actually don't have anything, but what I'm imagining in my head is some like super cute list icon on that folder, like something making it clear why it's there. We do not have that. I've honestly never even thought about doing that, but I love that idea.
It's kind of the like a callback or a backlink essentially.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like we create something here and we're referencing something there, and then when we go and visit it, we don't really remember like where it's coming from, or the scenario somebody goes and cleans up a folder. So I would be really interested in seeing some kind of an icon. Maybe we can mock that up with Figma and some DALL-E 2 and generate some ideas.
I'm taking notes over here. Yeah, I think I love that. I think that's a really good idea. And we've, you know, we're doing a lot with folders in OneDrive, right? And like, I mean, folders can exist in lists too. And so like, it kind of aligns with the story of like, we want you to be able to customize things that makes sense. And that makes sense to me, yeah.
Going down this path, because this is a deep dive and John and I like to try to break things on this same lines. So we have the attachments here that's kind of built in. Has there been any thought, and I feel like I'm not the only one who might have this question, but has there been any thought to being able to say, okay, like I want to connect this list to attachments, but then giving the user the option to pick like the destination for the attachments, like versus like, and you know, a pre-built folder in like site assets, maybe I can pick a document library where I have some metadata already there, and then I'm creating connection between the list and then the
Yeah,
doc.
more of like a symbolic link between them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
know that
is
would
so
maybe
cool.
fall into like a lookup column, but like
Well, that was where my head.
users aren't. I don't think like end users are going to be like, well, let me create a lookup column, because that's a little bit of a barrier, I think. So if like we're here and like I'm setting up the list, maybe have the option to pick a destination for the attachments, and then have a native or almost an out of the box lookup column created for it.
Yeah, that was as you were describing that scenario, lookup column was where my head was going. Where I'm like, but it's not the perfect scenario, because it's just not absolutely perfect, right? Like, especially if you maybe want to like pick a document library, right? Like that'd be really cool. So no, we don't have any of those plans coming up, but I do think that's a really powerful scenario.
I think we would say great feedback.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. People are catching on to that.
It's a buzz here at the conference this week.
I like walking onto the AMA stage. I had people be like, "We're going to count how many times you say thank you for that feedback." It's like, it's like
everybody take a shot.
Stage. It's just like the worst fear that you have. So another thing that I think we got to call out here. We're really kind of, there's so much to show you that we're jumping around a lot. But when I opened this new item, folks on the call might have noticed it looks a little different.
I was going to say, this is not a sidebar.
It is not a sidebar form. Yeah, we are snapping to a dialogue experience. That's what we call these things. So anything that kind of takes over the screen and grays out the background is what we're going to call a dialogue. And they're easy. You can click the X and dismiss them, hit the cancel, or I think you can even like, no, okay, we don't do that. But you can leave the experience. And the reason that we're doing that is the thing that popped out on the side, it was giving me whiplash. It was like watching tennis. Add new item, create over here, and then you see it appear over here. So like that was just a rough experience, combined with the fact that we want to focus on the content that you're typing in. When you're creating a new item, we understand from what we've connected with our customers on that like that is kind of the focus of what you're doing. And so we made it a full-fledged dialogue, and I'll show you a couple of places throughout the product too where we have dialogues appearing. I absolutely love it. I think it's a great way to help me focus. I know that sometimes I would like create a new item and this panel would just sit there for like 30 minutes while I got distracted by other things going on the list. So I think it's a really helpful way to do this. And then it's not just new items. If I go in, I can open up existing ones and you see that they're here. We have the comment panel on the side here, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit. Actually, we could dive in now because we're already in the collaboration. So in this comment section, you can go ahead and leave @mentions. Oh, I'm typing in Andy's name, not
Grady.
You can @mention people and leave a comment. As we're being Meta, I'm going to ask him if he can demo this. And you can send it. And so what that does is sends him a notification. And then in that notification, he'll open it and it'll take you right to this form so that he can see it. And then this comment section is actually attached to the list item properties. So we technically are calling the comments part of the list item metadata, but it is rendered in this UI experience that you see it. And I can see in the background here, we have some editing going on in this column. Yeah, when the full one's selected, that means someone has the form open, which I think is super cool to make it obvious. So as you're seeing this is how my team.
So when it's not just a cell, it's the entire row. That means somebody's editing the entire object on the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And so he's replying. I will tell you, we don't have the live updates on commenting just yet. So coming soon. Well, soonish. So if I refresh, we'd see his comments come in, but we do not have the commenting with the real updates just yet.
So maybe I missed this, but when you @mention Grady, get a notification, traditional notification through Outlook. And like I know, like looking at the list item, that there's a comment there because the comment block is called out.
Yeah, right. But this guy. Yep.
What about like I've been @mentioned somewhere. I'm not checking my email right now. I'm working here. Is there any other call out mechanism to me, like besides like having to click into the icon that I've specifically been mentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I think kind of what you're maybe looking at is like, is there something on the page where it says like, since you last left, you've been at mentioned 2 times and like 13 updates have been made.
I'm thinking Teams notifications, the red icon, I've
Right.
been mentioned.
Something making it clear.
Yeah, to minimize the context or the content switching and the friction going between apps. Like
Yeah.
I'm here, I got a train of thought. Let me just stay here. But oh, by the way, here's a red icon. You've been mentioned.
Absolutely. So the short answer would be no, we don't have that. The long answer is that our goal is to like snap to some of these familiar patterns that we have, and we do that in as we're slowly bringing lists into like the most like the forefront of kind of like setting examples on behalf of Microsoft with our UI patterns and our collaboration patterns. We're still kind of pulling in what exists already. And like one example of that is, we really like the sharing experience. That is just copy paste consistent across Microsoft 365. This presence indicator, same thing. And so that's something that is kind of like that next step.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that we have built yet. And, to be, people in the chat can chime in too, like to be super transparent, some of the conversations we have around that is, like what are updates that are most interesting? Like, does someone care if there's been an edit made on an item they created? Does someone care if there's been an edit made somewhere randomly? Is it just at mentions? And so those are some of the questions that we're asking. But I think the lowest hanging fruit is what you just described, where it's very familiar. It's like the Teams or like the Office client or Office app experiences where you get that clear little box saying, something relevant to you has happened, click here to go to it. And that's just kind of a later stage in our collaboration story.
Yeah, I think that could just be like really cool. Like maybe
It's
up
so
in the
cool.
the tabs area up on the right, like just a
Yeah.
little like a comment icon, but if you've been mentioned like specifically just a red dot
I
to like
know, I
call
love
it out.
that.
I think that would just be really neat. And you just mentioned something else that I just want to get this out of my head. I'm geeking out over this clearly.
That's why we're here. Yeah.
Tell me how you use List all day without telling me how you use List all day. The document or the details pane in like OneDrive or in a document library. So you know how you can go into like your OneDrive, and if you just open it up, it'll show you some recent activity. You worked on this, you opened that, you uploaded this.
Yeah.
Just getting that high level overview. And so that's something that's already familiar in SharePoint and OneDrive. It'd be kind of cool to see, like an activity feed like that over what changed here in the list recently. So it's kind of a way to consolidate it. And then if you were to select an individual list item, then you can see the specific, maybe some of the things that had changed for that particular list. This column was modified, or so-and-so, highlighted this. I think that could be really interesting. Not to put more on the backlog or more for discussion.
Well, this is something that kind of comes up pretty frequently around, I was going to try to see if I have it here. Because we have the similar concept of kind of that activity inside of the details pane. And something that we're constantly trying to rationalize is, what's the value of the details pane versus the form? And so this isn't something that's in my latest one here yet, but we are going to keep the details pane in the product for that activity experience. But I'm not going to tell you that that's a solution. It helps, and I do use it, myself. But I think what we're talking about here is really making it better, like making that activity more useful, more tailored to you. Because the activity that you'll see, even in OneDrive, the activity that you'll see is like kind of broad. It'll tell me some changes that happen that like aren't super relevant to me. And so when we're in this space of like leveraging our like graph underneath, and that's like kind of like the network of all the connections we have underneath the system, like we would like to get better to be able to know, like, Michaela and Grady collaborate together. So maybe that activity column shows Grady's updates, but it doesn't show, Amy's updates because I don't really work with her that much.
So recent and relevant.
Yeah, recent and relevant. And you're seeing those changes come to OneDrive, right? Where like when we're talking about some of those like for you sections or like ordering things based on relevance and like prediction of how like when you're going to collaborate with someone. And so I think it's kind of a cool direction that we're going in, and the activity thing will still be there in the product. But I like the push that you're giving us and that our customers are giving us, where it's like, let's actually make the activity experience more than just what it is today so that we can get more done. So just like a little bit of heads up for those on the call, like that is where we're thinking. Nothing to share, no dates to share, but that is where our minds are going.
We've had a couple of questions about the form that I wanted to make sure we don't we don't go too far away from. Early on, we had a question about adding a button to the form view, if there's the ability to add that. I don't know if there's more details that Larry wants to add in there, but
I feel like I know.
like to kick off a flow or something, I think is what he's looking to
So
do.
like additional formatting and through JSON essentially add a button to a column in a view. But I'm interpreting this as like we put the button on the form. So like I filled out some stuff here in the form. Now for a selected item, I want to start a
click to start a workflow or something.
Yeah, it's like I've got the form open. I'm entering in information. I'm I'm mentioning my colleagues. So like put a button to be able to like go ahead and trigger maybe a manually started flow or
something else. Or gosh, I couldn't even imagine scenarios where a button would open like information, like something saying like, do you need to learn more about what this field's asking for? Click here and it takes you to like a documentation or something too. So the way I pulled this up here because we're kind of hinting at it. So the form can be customized with JSON. And adding a button with this JSON, I've actually never done that. The way that I've added buttons to the form is through Power Automate. That's been the only way that I've ever done it personally. I might defer to you to see if you have other ideas there.
So like looking at the editor here, when you format the form, we can work with the header at the top, the main body, and then we can work with the footer. Now currently there's some limitations around that, but there is a GitHub repo that Microsoft helps maintain along with community members where they have a ton of samples available. So in some case you might not know JSON, but you can do a copy and paste and you can kind of format this and you can use those samples as a great way to get started. I'd have to look in there. I think the body right now is just kind of limited to organizing, grouping fields by sections. I don't think there's you might be able to tweak the layout a little bit, but I don't think you can add the button. But that being said, the header and the footer, we're able to add in things like links, like an email address and a mail to link.
Right.
So there might be somebody who's really well engaged with JSON that's done that. I'd have to check the repo. So I'll play around with that, later on when I'm headed to the airport.
Well,
and see,
I'm
but
thinking,
I'll report back off of that because somebody might have already figured out a little bit of that.
And I'm also thinking, I mean, you can use JSON in any column to add a button. And gosh, I'm just imagining being able to do that inside of that header or footer section. But I've personally never done it, and nor have I seen it. So I think that's something that we can play around with and see. And like you mentioned, maybe someone has already done it. I do know you can definitely do it in a Power Automate, but that's a little bit more friction there.
So maybe food for thought on this. Like if we create a Power Automate, we can connect it to a list using a SharePoint action for a selected item. Maybe to lower the barrier on that for a selected item could be like something that could be visible in the form. Either it's a list setting, or it's a default option, or like we can show and hide certain fields in the form. Maybe we can add the for a selected item and bring that in natively and not have to go through the JSON.
I would love that. I think that's a really great idea. And something that we always get asked, and this is a fact. The feature that I hear a lot about is, can we get cascading fields? And
I think that's actually been asked a couple of times.
In the chat?
I've got that in my list.
That was some of the first questions that were brought up.
I feel so connected to you guys. The cascading fields is one of the most asked for features. And I promise we're listening. It is a really hard problem for us to solve right now. But we hear you, and we have a feature where you can kind of set let me see here. You can go into the column and you can set kind of like conditional formulas using if and statements. So you kind of use like almost like Excel structure writing, where you can say like, if X then do Y, but it's not like, I mean, I know what cascading fields are, and this isn't fully satisfying that demand. So I hear the feedback, and we don't have any updates or dates to share. I just want to make it really clear that right now, this is kind of the best that we have. And
so conditionally show and hide the next
conditionally,
that you want to work with.
But I mean, I use products that have cascading, and I understand the beauty and the simplicity of it. And I mean, not just that, the power of it. There is something that I want to show. It's actually, it's a prototype. It's not live code, which I was trying to stay in live code for everyone here. But I feel like we would take a little journey into a prototype to show a forms.
If you're good with it, we're good with it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you want to? So I'm gonna have to pull it up for a second. Do you want to hide my screen while I'm doing that, so it's not
Sure.
people don't have to see this whole journey I'm gonna go on?
We're going down the rabbit hole now.
We are in the rabbit hole. Yes, we are. I think I have the video. I have it saved in so many places, but I want to show you guys the most modern one.
Sure.
Okay, if you go back to my screen, I'll go ahead and play it.
Okay. There we go.
I'm gonna pause as we talk through it, because when I do this demo, I get like 30 seconds to talk about it, but this is an opportunity to speak to it a little bit broader. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. So what we are adding is the ability to create and share forms natively inside of Microsoft Lists.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yes, and I want to pause here because what this is showing is something huge. There's the internal form, which we've never really called before. That's the form that comes as a default with the list, but you'll notice you can create another form. So this is kind of shattering the concept of forms inside of a list, where we're saying you can have multiple forms per list. Now, the scenario where this is critical, and you guys can speak to your scenarios as well, is I would want to send a different form to my external customers than what I would send the form to my internal customers. And the scenario that I would do that with the most is actually that agenda list that we were talking about, where it's like we have those weekly meetings. Sometimes those topics are guest speakers from Snapchat or Google, right, to come in and talk to our team. And it's like the form that I would want to send to that external customer to fill out. One, I want it to look prettier. Two, I want it to have different, maybe they don't need to see all the notes fields and stuff. So I can kind of customize what it looks like. So that's probably the most, you'll see more exciting things. But for me, this revolutionized the way that I'm able to actually get more done with lists.
So on that same topic,
yeah,
the internal external one, that's a really great concept. But I can tell you, and this is a question that I've had this week already. I get this every time we work with like Microsoft Lists, and when people are creating custom forms, and they're tying it back to things that like we used to be able to do with SharePoint Designer. Create a content type, and then there was a way to permission trim it based off of a SharePoint group using SharePoint Designer. So
Gotcha.
people are going to want, are going to have questions around, okay, we can create various versions of the form, but can I create and security trim certain versions of the form? Because I want managers to go back and do an approval on this, and then I want end users to be able to go and input data over here and minimize what fields they can see and interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. This actually came up the first time we ever showed this was to the MVPs at the MVP Summit. I think you were there. I think you were in the list session too.
Yeah.
This was the first time that we'd ever shown this, and that did come up. And there was a couple of things here. So the first one is the feature of like the thing that you could do with SharePoint where you say like only show the customer items that they created. And that's something that's like this classic setting. It's so hidden. So we took that back to the design team and we were like, let's put that front and center, right? Let's make it like a toggle or something. So it says only show people items that they've created, and let's not keep it hidden as this like classic experience. So that's one. And then the second thing that came up was exactly what you just mentioned, where it's like we had the security trimming in SharePoint Designer. Is that coming into this space? How does that work with links? And off the top of my head, I don't actually know what the feature crew landed on that feedback. And so that's something that this again is a prototype. This is of everything that I'm showing you. This will be the last thing that you guys get. So we have some time. We have some time to get back and answer that question. Because I don't know it. I don't know the answer. I don't know exactly what we landed on.
Okay.
So if
we got it out there. It's in the recording. we can circle back later on, and we can where on the wish list we've actually landed.
Yeah, when things are recorded, it's always fun. Okay, so I clicked on in this prototype, we clicked on the experience of actually going and creating that form, and a lot of things to unpack here. First, you could add custom logos and a custom header, which is awesome.
Nice.
And you saw it's like 2 clicks, right? It's like upload image, done. And then you see here, we kind of have the permissions. Anyone can respond. Outlook, embed QR code, and then embed's kind of a cool scenario. I imagine putting this, that what I explained with our Notify system, I imagine them putting the embedded form on their SharePoint site so that when I come in with all my asks, I just type in really quickly there. So I think they'll be using that immediately. And then you could customize which forms are shown. So this gets back to that scenario of you might want multiple forms for a single list, depending on what type of data you're trying to look for based on the audience. Let me hit play. Start. Oh, there we go. So you can kind of show and hide. And this UI is pretty consistent. If you've ever used our card editor, yeah, exactly. You're familiar. So it kind of goes through that, and it's so pretty. I love how pretty it is. And then when you share it out with people, here's what it looks like on mobile. Here's what it looks like on the web. You can kind of see what's happening. Where you can go in and click it.
This would be awesome for that prompt library that I was talking about, because I want to have them look like recipe cards and be able to add certain things depending on what category of prompt they're wanting to submit.
Yeah, and then everything goes directly into the list. There's no Power Automate setup behind the scenes. This is built natively inside of the actual list with the fields that are in the list. So everything gets added, and with real-time updates, you'll see those items just pop in a bunch, which honestly is so fun. I love when I send something out to my team and I'm like, boom, 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 get all the items in. And so that's really cool. And so one thing that I think is important to call out here that, again, I've kind of mentioned, sometimes I don't have all the time to speak to this, is this is a native experience inside of Microsoft Lists. It's not a Microsoft form. Today, if you want to achieve this goal, you have to go into Microsoft Forms, and then you have to pick fields that work with forms and lists, and then you have to create the form, build a flow to export the data into a list. And so that's a lot of steps, and we found that it's kind of hard for people to do.
That's 90% of what my flows are, is taking something from a form and putting it in a list. Combining that into just lists will be amazing for me. I'm going to get really rusty with Power Automate.
Love Microsoft Forms. And we work so closely with that team to make sure that we're building experiences that make their product better and our product better. And so we are constantly collaborating with them to say, how do we, eventually, how is there a system where maybe you could do it without a Power Automate, or maybe there's a way to embed a form inside of a list. I'm just completely spitballing here. My manager's gonna be like, stop talking.
That's what somebody said in the chat. I was like, why not just connect it?
It's one of those things where it's not us trying to say, don't use a form. Their designer has contributed so much to that experience. That's why it looks so beautiful. You'll notice the UI is very similar with theirs.
Yeah, I was noticing that. I was like, we bridged to the best of both worlds,
right?
And brought it together.
And so we just want to make an experience that kind of alleviates some of our customer pain while we kind of figure out a way to make it even better. Because like you said, I heard the feedback a ton that this is the flow that people are using, and then they would point out 6 or 7 issues, and it was gosh, this is just heartbreaking because it's such a good scenario for lists. So yeah, this, like I said, this is a complete prototype, not in code. It will be the last thing that you get of anything that I'm showing you guys today, but I love it, and I think it kind of ties together our whole story and the journey that we're going on with lists to really make it this collaborative tool to get all of your information in to then drive processes through. So I'll go back into the actual.
So there's a lot of excitement in the chat window around this. I see a lot of people are saying ship it.
Ship it.
So we're gonna
to set expectations. It's not that wasn't working code.
Ship it. No, that's just how good our design team is. That looked like working code.
That
was Cashman that said ship it. So.
Cash, he's throwing us under.
One of your colleagues. So
I think I heard my. There we go. Okay, you guys were watching me fumble around a little bit, but that's okay.
We took you off the screen.
Oh, wow, you guys are pros. You guys are pros. Yeah, let's go through. We've covered so much stuff, and it really is almost just coming out of excitement that we have for the product that we can't even hold it in. A couple of things that I do want to take some time to go through is we keep talking about this power of lists being get your data in, make it beautiful, fast and easy to edit, and then in the scenarios that you guys described and me, we keep mentioning automation. So I kind of want to go into that experience. And one of the things I want to show is a new automation that we're building, which I think is really cool. I actually just learned about it last night, which is so amazing. So this is the first item on our list. We finally made it to number 1. Automation can be done with 0 code. This is true. This is something that we have been working really hard on. We're using something called rules, where you can go in and create kind of sentence structure automation. So I'm going to start with some basic ones here. So when a new email is created, send an email to, and you can pick either a people field, you can pick who it's created by, modified by, or me. So I'm going to go ahead and say the owner. So when a new item is created, send an email to that owner. And like that's a scenario that I love because it lets me know whenever someone assigns things to me. So you can create that and you get a rule immediately built. Now, I mentioned that there's a new one coming, and this is one that I really enjoy. So this is a rule that says customize the condition by choosing a column, the value of the column, and who to notify. But we're making it better. So when you go down, you can say when maybe, let's do like category. When category changes, you can say to one of, which lets you kind of set multiple conditions.
Nice.
Before we just had to anything or a very specific value or to a not value. So this will say like when a category changes to something like views and columns or collab, then I want to send an email to Grady or to the owner of those, or yeah, let's do owner, because that's who's going to be relevant to that content. And this scenario is a little bit wonky as I'm like talking through it in the sentence structure, but you can imagine the power of saying the or statement because it lets you create one rule for multiple conditions. So this is one that I'm so excited about. And you can add a bunch of stuff in here too. I know I've seen some of y'all's choice columns where there's like 45 choices in there. So I imagine there's a lot of opportunity here to build out a much more simplified rule. Because when
to clarify, the send an email, the fields that are there's the created by field, the modified field, the me, and then owner. That was a people column that you've added to the list. So going down that rabbit hole just a little bit, I would assume that I can enter in names, but what about like groups and distribution lists and security groups and Microsoft 365 groups? Because I'm thinking about this like, okay, now I have all like I have this. The subscription list that John and I created a few episodes back. I have a subscription list, and like maybe I put that together in a distribution list, for instance. And now I'm using this list, and I want to create a rule based off of whenever the webinar end time is over. Here's a follow-up link to maybe where the recording of the webinar is and some additional content, and I can automate some of this from the list. So groups inside of the send an email field.
Yeah, so that is, that's like kind of tying together all of our features. So when you're using a people field inside of the list, under the hood, it's a lookup column, and it's a lookup column into, we're gonna get real nerdy here. It's a lookup column into the people information list inside of the list product, which actually looks up into the AAD. So if you have groups set up in your tenant, you can access them through the people column. And then this here is, it's not doing anything special.
So I just create a people column and then I can,
Right. So it's kind of like if you have that set up in the tenant, then the lookup column will access it. And then the creating a rule just leverages whatever email we're getting back from the system. So that makes it kind of cool.
So I'm excited about that. That is awesome.
That
is awesome. So, all right. So
we're going to call that a little list fact there. But of course, we know that what I just showed you, and we can just kind of land here on this page for a second, a new item created and item deleted and data in a column changes. That doesn't cover a lot of scenarios for people. We are well aware. These were just 3 of the most common scenarios. And that's why we kind of built them in this like sentence structure with no code. I can't even call this low code. Like this is no code.
Yeah.
But we know that there's much more complicated scenarios. And so we still fully integrate with the Power Platform. And so that's where we see the integrate button down here, where you can go into kind of Power Automate and build out as intense flows as you need. And, that could be its own 2-hour podcast, right? Go or podcast, 2-hour live stream of like everything you can do in Power Automate or like even Power Pages. Like there's just so much in that ecosystem. And I'll summarize it as like we have over 300 connectors that work with lists in that space. So if there's anything that you're wanting to do, there's a really good chance that there's a way to achieve it. And it's usually within the community where I find the solutions. And that's how like I said, I build this product. I live and breathe it every day. And sometimes I will just reach out to MVPs or people in the community being like, hey, do you know of a way to like connect this list to this like Teams channel thing that I'm trying to use? Like, is there a connector that exists there? And usually the answer is yes. And so they're getting updated all of the time. So it's kind of a call out. I think unless we're getting like a ton of questions, we'll probably leave the Power Automate story at that for right now.
Yes, what we headed next.
Okay, so I kind of want to conclude this collab story that we're in here,
right.
and then we'll be done. So if I go ahead and hit the share button, you're going to see a new share dialog, and this is something that I called out when we were talking about the collaboration presence experience. This is the same share dialog that's across all of Microsoft 365. So it's the same experience, the same UI, which makes it really easy to use. And it's new. This new experience is rolling out. And the things that are new is you'll notice you can hover over and see who has access and what types of links they have. And you can click in and just see it directly here, which is really cool, as well as going into the actual links section. And you can still kind of copy these, delete, or edit them. I don't know about you guys. I share, like, copy paste links is the way that I like to share everything. I'll text it to a friend, send it to a Teams channel. Like, that's just kind of my way of working. So we made a change to make this a single click button with that big notification that you just saw there, confirming that it's actually in your clipboard. One of my biggest pet peeves was like clicking copy link and then pasting, and it'd be an old clipboard because you had to actually click twice. So making that a single click and having that big notification has saved me so many wrong pastings that I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on this, because I think it's going to really make it better. And then these are the same that we've had in the product for a while, but it's always nice to kind of look at them. So we have 3 different levels of permissioning on a list. And these first 2, I think, can get a little bit confusing for people. The first one is you can edit the list, which lets you edit the schema. And so when I say schema of a list, this lets you add columns, remove columns, create views. Like, you have full control of that list. And we call it the schema, right? Like, if you want to do anything foundational to this database, you can edit it. But then editing items just lets you add, remove, and update metadata on the items. So if you can edit items with someone, they will not be able to make a new column. They won't be able to delete a column. They won't be able to create a new view. And then lastly, we have the can view option, which just lets someone literally read and share the list. And so these options here kind of give a good way to break it down. And I put this in the list, so I'm kind of kicking myself here, but we're going to do it. For those on the call who have had history with the product for a while, you'll be familiar with something called granting access, which you can actually break the inheritance on a list when you do that. And we support, I want to say it's like 50,000 broken inheritance per
50,000 per object.
So believe it or not, sometimes that's not enough for customers. But I just want to call out that we still support it. The sharing dialog is, kind of our path forward, but we're in no way removing any of that grant access permissioning, because we want you guys to be able to go through, and if you need to break that inheritance, do it. It is kind of it's not as fast and easy, but we totally support it. So I just want to call that out.
And along the lines of sharing, so you went to the share button in the command bar at the top, and that gave us the options to share the list, but list items. But I know some people are going to ask the ability to share an individual item.
It's a great question. Yeah, I did. I totally kind of did that. So if you click on an item, we have the selection command bar up here. You can click share, and it'll actually share this specific item.
Just this row.
Just that row. So
yeah, I've used that a lot. That's really helpful.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And so this will add one of those scopes to your permissions, which is probably how people get close to the 50,000, because it'll, I'm saying scopes. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that word, but you can, inside of a list, if you want to share items uniquely, you can do that with that kind of creating multiple scopes in there. So this lets you share per item, and the experience when you get there is the person will kind of get a link to just that item. And if they don't have access to the rest of the list, they won't see it. They just see the single item that you sent them, which is really cool. It's kind of powerful.
So we have a global share and a granular share that's built in, but then we still have the traditional permission and access, direct access model.
Exactly. So it's kind of covering the best of all worlds. From our telemetry, the most common thing that we see is the sharing of the entire list. That seems to be the most popular after we've launched that. I'm intrigued to see how that plays out with this new share dialogue, because I think the copy link will become the new most popular with this experience. That's just my hypothesis. You guys can prove me right or wrong.
So I have one more, and then we can wrap up our talk on collaboration and move on. But one of the questions that we've had for a long time, and it comes from end users, when they start working with views, maybe filtering by category, maybe grouping by category, they want to be able to maybe grant access to just those things. Like I filter down, and rather than sharing all 6 of these collab items individually, maybe be able to share all 6 of those in one share. So like I filter down to just the collaboration column and then create a share. I know that would probably be a big lift, but like I get asked that all the time. Like, can we do permissions on a view?
Yeah, that's a question we had from LinkedIn too that I've got on the screen.
On a view, and then make that available.
Yeah, that is a very cool feature. And it does tie into everything that you just described. And that is something, it's kind of interesting. I haven't been getting that feedback as frequently this year, but early on, like probably back in like 2018, that was like the most asked for thing that I experienced was, I want column level permissioning and I want view level permissioning. And that comes with kind of that view level sharing. We have never done that. We've never gone towards that path. But I do think that it's a very powerful scenario, and I think it has a lot of merits. There's no plans on the roadmap to share that, or in the next year or two. But we have it kind of in our like perpetual feedback, always given back. And I think that actually kind of segues us nicely into some of the view discussion, which I think really is kind of the full power of lists here. And the way that I will always talk about this is that, and we've already kind of told the stories a little bit, like the list is only as powerful as the data in it. So we want to make your editing experience better. We want to make your collection experience better. We want to get the best data possible in your list so that you can do more with it. And I feel like we're now in that section of like, what do you actually do though, once you have all this data? And the answer is views and visualization, so that you can simply load your list and see it in a way that makes sense for you. And so one of the first things that we have is the ability to kind of go into and filter down based on what you want to see. Well, that was taking a while. We can probably do it this way.
Maybe a quick refresh.
Yeah. Let me see.
John, do you have the technical difficulties? Music queued up.
Yeah.
Benny Hill.
Even though we're live streaming, we can totally still blame the conference Wi-Fi.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm amazed that like you're seeing the live collab cursors all live, on conference Wi-Fi.
A lag here. And as we mentioned, this is we'll be transparent. This is 100% inside of my internal dev environment. So this is one where we don't.
There it goes.
But it's okay. We got the whole thing here. So let's see if this works a little bit better now. So you go into the filter. Oh, at least we see the spinner. So we can add some filters where maybe I only want to see things that I'm going to speak about. This one's a little bit prettier for demoing. And you'll notice we have filter pills that appear now. Yay! One of the biggest complaints we'd always get is someone gets access to a list and I'd be like, I'm missing all my data. And we're like, you're not missing it. You just have filters applied and we don't show you them anywhere in the UI. So this is kind of tackling some of that feedback. And then maybe I want to go even deeper and say, I only want to talk about things within like the collab and views space. So I now have a view that's kind of tailored to like me and my talking points. And then maybe I want to sort it. Right now it's sorted by category. Maybe I want to sort it alphabetically here. And so now I can go in and actually save this view, and I can save this as, Michaela's talk track. I'm going to keep it as a public view because I want, my collaborators to see. And so now what you'll see is I get a new tab over here where it keeps all of these filters that I've applied. And so that's like kind of the crux of view management. So when you're coming into the product, you have your all items, and then you can go into and kind of par down to what's more important so that you can get your work done. Now, I've got to talk kind of about the elephant in the room that we just saw here. This list view looks different than the other ones. When I'm creating these views, I am always starting from kind of like the default all items experience. So that means that in the default view that I have, we have some of these columns that I had hidden in that other view. But when I create this new view, we start from kind of like everything and you par down. And so that's kind of a conceptual thing to think about when you're creating these views. You start with it all, and then you hack away as you need to. So for example, I don't really want to see who's rated. So I'm going to go ahead and here just hide this column. User rating, I'm going to go ahead and hide this column. I actually don't really need notes inside of this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that column. And then my view will keep that persisted. So now I kind of have this view that's an incredible way to just get to my content super easily. Now, one thing I want to call out is that this is a change that we made a little bit ago, but it's part of our kind of push for editing in grid. So right now this list isn't in grid because my default list, I didn't actually save it in grid mode. So I can go ahead and put this in grid, and you'll notice that we got the asterisks up there indicating that my view has been changed. I can go ahead and save that view, and it'll now persist in grid mode for everybody that comes to this view. I prefer working out of grid mode, so I'm going to keep it like this. And then one thing I also want to call out is that we have a fixed height row so that it makes all of your forms 48 pixels, so it's uniform. I also love this view. Of course, not everyone does. Everyone has personal preference. So you can do the auto fit height where it kind of like wraps your text in ways that make sense to you. But this is still kind of sticking in, like, I would say the most like vanilla use of lists where we kind of have like rows and columns. So I want to show you some more intense ways that you can use views. So the first one here that I'll show you is kind of a calendar view, which actually, as I'm realizing this, I don't think we have a date field on here. So to use a calendar view, you need to have dates in your list. So I'm going to go ahead and create a date column real quick, and we'll throw some dates in there so we see them. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And you guys could probably I'll throw one in there at least so we see it populate, and then you guys can edit it in the background. So when I go in and now create this calendar view, we can call it just calendar for now. There's a lot going on here that I am so excited to show you guys. Month is how we started. This is how this feature was born. It was a monthly view. We are now shipping weekly layout this week. This is what we started launching 2 days ago. And then you could also have day view. So I'm going to put it in the weekly view. And then you get to pick the calendar dates that you show by. I'm going to do the date field that I just added, and that's also going to be my end time. And then I can go in here and kind of choose what appears. So I can have either the title appear. These are every column possible in the app. I like title. I think that makes sense. For a subheading, I might add like category maybe. And then that way you can see like the title of the item and the category in it. So I can go ahead and hit create, and you'll see that now it shows me my weekly layout of this calendar view. And then you go in, you can pop it open. We have that dialogue experience. And of course, in this thing, you can kind of click and start creating blank ones, and it will create it on the day that you clicked on. If you have time turned on, which we can kind of show that real quickly too, because of course, Lists is the most flexible product on the earth, I think. You can go in and edit this column to show time. And when we do that, your calendar view will update. So you see here that now I kind of have like the time. And as we're creating this one at midnight, but no worries. I mean, you can drag and drop here and bring it down.
I was going to call that out. That's one of my favorite features about the modern calendar view is the ability to drag and drop. And now that we can go into the different scopes and I can even drag and drop within that, it's going to make creating this so much easier because I don't have to worry about going into the field, selecting from the date picker, going to the next one, into the date picker. I can just, it's going to be 30 minutes. I'm going to drop it at the top, drag it down to the time that I want, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, which is super cool. And There's another thing that we have, I think we're rolling it out. I don't know how far along it is right now, but this was the most, there's 2 pieces of feedback that I've gotten the most on this view. The first one is I want to be able to set conditional formatting in my calendar view. The second is reoccurring events. I'm going to tackle the first one because I have a solution for you guys. A little forewarning that we don't have a solution for the second one yet. So when I go,
you got our hopes up.
I know, I'm sorry. So I can go in and I can actually add and remove fields that are set inside of this view property. I don't know if I didn't click it or it's not working. Well, let me see if maybe I already did it. Okay, so I can add, let me add in like category. Where's that? Maybe owner we could even do. So I'm going to add this into the view properties of my list. And then that lets me kind of configure my conditional rules on those properties, like the different columns. So I can go in and edit based on, oh, it didn't do it. Well, I'll show you this for now. So category is one that's been chosen. As you can see here, that was kind of like the subtitle that I had set. So I can do, if category is equal to a platform, well, actually, let's do creation. That's what we have. Then I want to show list item as like red. So I can go ahead and hit save. We don't have any category in here. Let's do if category is equal to views and columns. There we go. So you see that it turned red. So as we added more date fields into this list, you can build out a bunch of conditions to say, and like maybe in the background, you guys could throw in a platform one, add a date to a platform field so it appears in the calendar view. You can say if category is equal to platform, show list is green. And so then you'll see kind of the difference there. And you could do that with any column that you have on the list. The demo was a little bit janky there, but you add owner, hit apply, and then you should start to see it appear in those kind of drop-down options. And then just to really, solidify this, oh, cool. Yeah, you got the date in there. Let me do a little refresh just because I don't think we get live updates on the calendar view yet. Oops.
While you're refreshing, I just want to throw this out there. I use the color coding in the calendar view with the rules that you're talking about.
Amazing.
I use that already, and it is super helpful.
Oh, they were here. I'm sorry, they were here already. Just scroll down so I didn't see them. So you can see here, these are things that are in a different category. So you can kind of color code them. So the calendar view is getting a lot of improvements, and I love them. I think it really makes it easier to use. And in all the scenarios that I described, there is a component of a date. Just to kind of share some facts, date is our 4th most common field type inside of a list. So we know that calendar view has a lot of opportunity inside this space. But not just calendar, as you saw, there's a bunch of other ones here. So we have a board view as well, where it kind of lets you create a visualization of a project moving through. So you can organize it by we'll do review. You can organize it by a choice field. And you can go ahead and hit create, and you can see it creates another view tab. And this, you can kind of like drag and drop between the buckets depending on it. Usually I use board view when there's something slightly more linear of a project, like when we're trying to launch an update to lists, that'll be like where we drag things into the done bucket. But for this scenario, it does kind of make sense, right? Like we have some things that, this is a list fact. Here's ones that we haven't figured out yet, where we might want to go through and drag it over to the myth bucket. And again, this can be fully customized, where you can go in and customize that card, and you can show all the different categories that you want or not, kind of depending on what you're looking to do here. And so you can hide that, which kind of makes it a little bit uninteresting here. But you see all the different layouts, and you can drag and drop them to make them in an order that makes sense to you.
So I use this for training. So
cool.
The webinars list that we have a primary product column and then a secondary product column. So I can go into the board view and it's organized by the product. And at a glance, I can see I've got a ton of Teams training, because you get the total at the top right next to the name. So I can see I've got a ton of Teams training, but I probably haven't given as much love to Microsoft 365 groups over the course of the year or whatever. So at a glance, I can see the bucket, and I can see what things we're concentrating on in training. And then as things change, okay, well, this was primarily a Teams thing, but now we're viewing it more as a list thing. And so I can drag it over to that column, and it automatically updates the category for me. So it's not just moving through a process. This is actually super helpful for. It's also just kind of 10,000 foot view organizing information.
That's a really great way to think about it too. And it's not just linear. That's a great point. And you have these kind of concepts of buckets that we call them here. And some of the improvements that we've made is adding the custom buckets, as well as you can actually create a board view for a column that doesn't exist yet. So you can create a new column to organize by. So you can kind of go in, and it's really going back to this concept that I keep landing of, like, we want this to be just as powerful as lists have always been, but flexible for your needs. So if you didn't have a choice field in there because you're just getting started, you can kind of create on the go, which is really cool. And I saw a question pop in that's actually something that I've been thinking a lot about myself, which is we should have a way to distinguish between private and public views. And I've actually brought this up to our designer because I think that's a really cool, powerful thing to do. So I'm just calling it, I acknowledge that. We're talking about it internally. Nothing to share, though, at this point.
Another good comment, too, is like this is a great reason to look into something like bidirectional sync with things like Planner and To Do and other products, because as it's merging together and like, oh, you got native forms, you've got board view and calendar view. I wonder if some organizations, if it unveils a whole new like what to use when type of struggle internally, and if these things could connect to some of those places that maybe have more adoption, then maybe it could drive people to list more because they're not recreating the wheel, moving content around. So that was a great comment for that person on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I love that. I think that, John, you nailed it with saying it could maybe help explain some of the when to use what dialogue that we have a lot of.
Yeah, it's gonna be like, it doesn't matter. It's synced in lists. That's great. That would be
cool.
Exactly.
It doesn't really matter. You can choose to work in the space that makes the most sense to you.
You choose your own entry point.
Yeah. And it's kind of like everything's updating. And that, it's also really nice when, I'm sure you guys actually experience this more than I do, because I am on the list team. That's not hard for me to get everyone to just use the list. But if people are more familiar with a different entry point, just letting them use whatever they want, and you don't have to worry about it because it's all in the same storage. So like, I think that's a really cool experience. I was going to go through, and we kind of went through a bunch of these already. There's one topic that I feel like we should probably talk about, and that is thresholds. Sometimes we dance around this, and I feel like
list view threshold.
List view threshold. I'm sure you've all heard it, maybe even experienced it. And we have been doing so much work to improve this over the last probably 5 years. And sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to understand, like, why do I sometimes hit this? Why do I sometimes not hit it? And what is Microsoft doing to like make me never have to think about this again? And so we have a couple of answers there. And so I just want to start off, like, the 5,000 list view threshold is what was kind of in the product for about 15 years in SharePoint. That's the threshold that you see for the amount of items you can put in a folder. That's what you would see for the amount of items that we could query at once. And that was kind of historically the number that would cause chaos inside of an ecosystem. And we did something that I think really alleviated probably like the 40% cases of people having issues, where we started adding auto indexing on a list. So when you would go into a list that, maybe it's only 3,000 items right now, but you start kind of filtering or you start sorting. We made some changes in our backend to say, okay, when that happens, let's actually add an auto index on it so that if this list doubles in size, it doesn't just break. It's applying these indexes based on what you're doing in the list. But that only works up to 20,000 items. We only auto index up to 20,000. So when you're going beyond the 20,000, you could keep using those that have been applied to your list. But sometimes we see issues hit because maybe what you were doing with your list when it was 10,000 items is not the same as what you're trying to do with your list when it's 75,000 items. And so that's where kind of more of like manual indexing comes in place, which is not my favorite answer. But we do have a technology that's been kind of launching and growing. And I think it's where kind of the future of the space is going. And that is a technology that we call internally Nucleus. I'm not sure if folks have heard about it, but behind the scenes, what it's doing is actually working very similarly to the OneDrive Sync client. We don't have a client app for List. We're not going in that direction. But But what it's doing behind the scenes is actually taking a list, syncing it to your computer. And the way that we talk about this is usually in the like, okay, you can work with your list offline. You don't need to have internet connection. But the point that gets missed sometimes with that, and where I actually think the power of Nucleus lies in, is that for up to 250,000 items, that taking it offline makes it instantaneous. It makes the list immediately respond, and that alleviates not just throttling issues, but it actually brings in the capabilities that we see on a list with like only 100 items. And some of those capabilities include things like giving you the total list count. Like right now, if this list was 20,000 items, you wouldn't see the count. Like we wouldn't know. We would give you 5,000 because that's all that we're querying. If we had our indexing set up right, we could probably give you 20,000 items, but we wouldn't know much beyond that. And so with Nucleus, you could actually get like the total count of items. You go into the filter pane, and you see how many. When you click an item, you see the total amount of items with that filter applied. And so I have a large list. It's not running with Nucleus on it because that's getting into even bigger lists. But I did want to kind of show this here, and this is now inside my Microsoft environment. But this list has about 21,000 items in it, and you'll notice that it's still fast. And I've set up absolutely no indexing on this list at all. I haven't gone into Classic or touched it. And so when I go in and add these filters, you'll see like it's still super fast, and you'll see the count is 4,420. And the second I add another one here, we get over that 5,000 querying threshold, so the count disappears. So when I hook this list up to Nucleus, none of those limitations hit, and I'm already over the 20,000 item limit. And so we have tested the Nucleus power internally on lists up to like 1.2 million items, and it continues to be very consistent with the experience. We don't see a degradation in perf. We don't see a degradation in features. I like to say 250,000 items because that's where most of the testing happens. But as we keep kind of rolling out this Nucleus experience where it'll turn on for all lists by default, you'll start to notice kind of these little things that are switching where it's instantaneous because it's syncing to your PC. You're not hitting any issues. You're always aware of how much content you have. Another example here is that like right here, we say 30 or more items. Again, an old throttling logic that we have in place where we would only show filters on the first 30 filters that you have in the list. So if you had actually like 120 filters applied, you'd have to keep hitting see all to see them. With Nucleus turned on, that entire thing is removed. We can show you filters. We'll show you 120. You click on this, it'll show you exactly all 5,000 items that it has. And so the Nucleus technology is something that we started rolling out in this like 2 day ago push, where the goal is to have it on by default for all lists. And there is some technology, like there are some things that we haven't been able to support yet in Nucleus. Like for example, the rating column is so new that if you have a rating column on a list, we say, let's turn off Nucleus for now. We want to make sure they work perfectly together before we like default to it. So there are a few of those kind of got you moments that we'll cover in documentation. But the goal is that every list just uses Nucleus to start. So yes, you can work offline, but the power and the future of it is really going to have this instantaneous, like immediate ability to filter and search. And the other thing too that I absolutely love is you'll see here that when I scroll, we get this like scroll bar. And for those who are familiar with working with databases, like behind the scene, this is a SQL database, we're just querying, right? We're querying as we continue scrolling. We call it a virtualization of the list. When you have Nucleus enabled, your scroll bar will be a set size. So you can drag it all the way to the bottom of the list, you can go to the top. You just kind of have a full understanding of how much data you're working with, which I think is really cool. Sadly, my large list is not set up with this. I couldn't get this ready by today, but the goal is to have that work for every list in the future.
Now,
Nice.
How does that apply to the progressive web app for
Good
lists?
question. Yeah, so it actually has the exact same capabilities. And so the PWA, progressive web app, is a way to kind of take lists web experience and put it as an app on your computer. And behind the scenes, it is just the web. And the PWA app leverages Nucleus the same way, which is really cool. So if you're working in the PWA experience, you can actually just open it and it works end to end with no internet and really fast. same way that the browser would, which is it's very cool. And I honestly, I can't figure out what motivates some people to be web versus PWA. I see pretty much equal split across my team. Some people use the PWA exclusively, and some people just use the browser. So I don't know. There's not a functionality difference. I think it's more of a personal preference.
Yeah, I'm a big PWA user.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
My team is so split. I see so many people wanting to do that, to just kind of choose which ones they're doing there.
For me, it's a convenience thing.
Yeah.
I can anchor the PWA app in my dock down at the bottom.
So true.
And so it's just like basically my mouse cursor down and bam, there it is. I'm in the list versus let me open the web browser, go to Microsoft 365 Home, go to the app launcher, and then get into list or bookmark it in my browser. It's just, right there, first class citizen, click on it, and then I'm in the list and I'm working.
That is very fast. Yeah, I mean, I use all of it because I'm constantly trying to test everything to make sure nothing breaks. But it'll work consistently. So I feel like we need to address the threshold problem because it's something that people hit. I hear it a lot. And I think sometimes it's nice to have a breakdown of like, here's why some of these issues are happening to help you avoid them. And then also know that like, we hear this pain point and we've invested so heavily into this technology that we're calling Nucleus. I think publicly we're calling, I mean, I've said the word Nucleus publicly, but we're calling it just like offline mode maybe, or fast mode. I don't exactly know what we're
I've heard Jeff Teeper say Nucleus a few times at like M365 conferences and stuff. Yeah. It's not like a secret. Yeah.
It's just kind of funny. It'd be like, because we have code names for every single thing that we build. So it feels weird saying the code name on stage because I'm like, it's like a whole mental shift between the code names and the real names. But it's something that I think is going to kind of revolutionize this. And I know we're not talking about document libraries here, but how can we not in the context of lists? Everything that we're doing in this space, we're trying to bring into the document libraries. It'll come later. We're launching this. We're making sure it's stable. We're making the experience good. That will include things like Nucleus coming to document libraries, where at the keynote we actually did, or maybe it was the M365 keynote, there were actually a couple of quick demos showing the document library using the Nucleus technology. And so that consistency, I think, is really powerful, especially for, folks that have been in the space for a while. Like a document library with metadata is just a list, right? It is a list, but it's a list that's tailored. It's a template of a list. The list default is a 101 or the 100 template, and the document library is a 101. It's our next most used. So before we move on, because I feel like we need to go into some of the creation stuff, I want to show one thing because I hear a lot of feedback where people are like, editing in grid is scary. Customers will make accidents. Customers don't know what they're doing, or like maybe we don't know exactly what to do here. So I'm going to give it another refresh, and I want to show you kind of our undo redo functionality because I think it can let you edit with confidence in a way that we haven't seen in the past. There we go. Okay, let me make it big again. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things here, and this isn't going to be a huge one, but I make a couple of things in between, and then I can hit undo. So it undoes those changes. And if I didn't mean to undo, I can redo them right back. And this is for things, like I think the absolute worst case scenario is when you like accidentally delete, like you hit the delete button, or you like accidentally delete and then you save. And actually, sorry, you can't. Let's hit undo.
Because required.
Maybe over here. Yeah, this one, you like go ahead and accidentally delete, and then you save on accident, and it's just a mess. You can undo that, and it brings it back. And so this is undo redo for up to 100 actions inside of a list, which is a lot. I personally have never hit more than 50, but it's something that kind of lets me confidently make sure that if I'm doing anything accidentally, I can go back and the way that I want it to. And this kind of ties into another change that we made in the product that folks might be interested in, where we have version history in a list. We have up to 50,000 versions per list item. And before, you kind of had to know that we had that and go into kind of the like classic settings, version settings, turn it on, and then enable it. But that's such a mess. And like by the time you discover that we have version history, something has happened. It's too late. Something has happened that's bad to your list if you're looking for it. So we made a change where we just turned on version history by default. We didn't do 50,000 per item. That's kind of an overkill, honestly, for most scenarios. So we turned it on where there's 50 version histories per item. So if you truly feel like you're getting stuck or there's something like a little bit just off in your list, you can kind of go in and look at the version history through those last 50. And if it's not enough, you can go in and update it and set it up to 50,000 items. So a really cool way to make sure that your data is staying safe, secure, edit with confidence. We want people sharing their lists with edit permission so that people can collaborate easier together.
Uh-oh, your audio cut out.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, Andy, you're there, but a little bit scratchy.
All right, I'm now. Check 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, it's scratchy on my side. But no, as you were saying, like, I think that's a huge improvement to have that enabled by default, you know, to have version history. Like you said, you don't want to find out that it exists after there's already a problem. And then, you know, usually it's the IT guy, you know, trying not to say, I told you so, or look, you know, all high and mighty to explain how you can turn it on. The fact that it's there as a safety net is way better, in my opinion. So that's
it's
huge.
a smart decision. Yeah. And I think it
Yeah.
makes sense. It's something that, I mean, I hope no one ever needs to find it, right? Like, I hope that there's never a thing where your item gets so corrupted you have to like go back 45 versions. But obviously you might, and so that's something where we're like, we just have to be realistic that that's something that will happen. So I wanted to show you Lists Home and kind of talk through creation a little bit.
Hold
here.
on one
Yeah, go
second.
ahead.
The audio is a little scratchy, so let's.
Yeah, I don't know if it's if you chose a different microphone or something, Andy.
Just 1 second.
It was clipping like crazy. Were you unplugging stuff in the middle of the live stream? Awesome.
All right, check 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, you're back. It sounds clean now.
Sorry about that.
That's awesome.
Mine sound good too?
Yeah, it sounds good. But yeah, and that's a really good takeaway, I think, for people too, that you can go up to 50,000, but keep in mind when you're, you know, doing trivia at the bar later that it's 50 by default. I think that's a good takeaway for people to know. So
Yes. 50,000, yeah, it's a lot. That's a lot of version histories. 50 felt right.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a time check. We're kind of getting up to the top of the hour. We're okay to go over a little bit. If
Yeah,
there's
I
some
mean,
flexibility.
you and I, so we actually both have sessions at this conference right after. I'm doing the list session, so I'm just practicing. So
Nice.
for me, this is just a warm up.
Yeah.
I think maybe we kind of conclude with some of this creation stuff. And,
Yeah, sounds
go
good.
ahead and get the
Yeah.
last few things that you want to.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then I'll go try to find my cell phone. I was so excited to get here. I left my phone on the walk in here.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? I was like, how am I going to get pictures from my Instagram? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so with the creation experience, we have made, I mean, these aren't super new, but starting around 2020, we really came out with, you know, what do you use lists for? And the best way to answer that is showing people real life examples. And one of the ways that we're doing that is with templating. And so for some reason, I keep timing out, but we'll just refresh it. Okay, so our templating story is kind of twofold here, where we want, one, people to be able to like get started faster than ever. Two, feel inspired. So if it's your first time ever coming to the list product, it makes it so much easier to be like, oh, I have an issue. This is what the issues use. Here's what it comes with. Here's a preview of what the list might look like with my data in it. So we want you guys to kind of feel like you can get started easier and make it easier on the IT team where someone might be like, what's lists? And instead of getting that question when they open the app and try to actually use it, they can probably answer the question themselves with these templates. And so these templates are been super successful in our product. We keep kind of growing them. As you can see, they're getting much bigger.
We're big fans of playlist.
Oh, let's see a look at that one because that is such a cool one.
I always start from a template. Like that prompt library that I built earlier this week, I started from the recipe tracker and then I adapt it to whatever I want it to be.
So you made a prompt cookbook.
Basically, yeah. Because I was thinking along the lines of like Ratatouille, like anyone can cook, you know? So it's like these prompts, they're like recipes, right? To get what you want out of an AI.
So what I just did here when we were chatting was creating the playlist template, which is one of our newer ones. Probably launched in February. And this is integrated fully with Stream. So if you use Microsoft Stream for like company broadcasts or on Teams, this is what we're actually storing things on, which Stream is now stored on OneDrive. It's the whole thing. But it's integrated with it. So what I can do now is I went into this list, I created add new item, and it took me to my file picker so I can upload these videos. And you're seeing in the file picker our beautiful colored folders. If you're not familiar, go Google OneDrive colored folders. It'll come up a lot of details there. But I can select these, and it'll actually create items for each of these videos that I have. And so then if I want, I can go in and actually kind of go to the all items view and start adding my metadata on it so that I can kind of filter it down. And this view I use, so I showed you that like super polished video of the forms experience. I have hundreds of those videos. They're like final V2, final V3, up to final V50. As you can imagine, making these videos across 3 designers and post-production, it takes so many iterations. So the playlist is how we manage all of them. And we add metadata being like, conference we're using this for, and it lets you kind of filter down so that you don't have to like keep going through a chat and finding these links. So I love the playlist one as well. And I think it's kind of a nice one to see. And I mean, I think the thing to really drive home here too is, I did this in maybe 5 clicks while you guys were talking in the background. Like it really helps when you start with a template to like not have to think through all of the different metadata you might want. It lets you kind of get a kickstart into what you're doing. And, of course, we have the things that we know and love. You can create a blank list. You can create a list from an existing one. You can create a list from Excel or from a CSV file. So these 3 are kind of the original starting features. The from existing list was actually like the second feature I ever built in my entire career. The from CSV is a little bit newer. And, honestly, a question that we get a lot is how do I move my lists, whether it's between like team sites or it's from like my list into a different one. And we don't have the ability to move lists just yet. We don't have that functionality built in our back end or our front end. And one of the ways I kind of alleviate customer pain is with the CSV file, where you can kind of export your list to a CSV. You can keep the formatting on it, and then you can create a list from that CSV file in a different location.
So it gives you the items and the formatting. Views.
I'm not sure about views.
Okay. Well, we'll dive into that and find about that offline. But getting the columns, items, and the formatting to the CSV, and then being able to create a new list from that somewhere else.
From CSV,
I'll take that.
It's I mean, I hear myself when I say it, or like to move a list, you just you have the
here's 30. So
you just follow this long blog post.
First, you learn what CSV means.
John and I are going to export a list from one site collection to another.
I mean, honestly, that would be a journey to go on together.
That brings up a good question, though, too, which is what about? So there's creating a list from Excel, but what about if you got the list structure, all set up and like you want to add things from Excel? Has there been any thoughts about like doing like a bulk addition as an import from one of those sources?
I see what you're saying. No, not necessarily. The thing that we have is copy paste. Which is the fastest. So if you're creating from Excel, it will come in with all that data. And then, limits are my favorite thing to talk about. Excel kind of has a 20,000 row limit when you're importing and exporting, which it's just there. So when you're importing from Excel, getting over that 20,000 item, and it's a throttle, right? So you might have a Excel spreadsheet with 80,000 rows that you can import if you try enough times. But 20,000 is where you kind of see like the success start to drop. And so when you're getting over that 20,000 item, that's where the bulk editing, it's the kind of the copy paste experience, or writing a flow to edit or to add into your list automatically.
Okay.
So the other thing that you see here, and the audience I feel like is the right audience for this. And if it's not the right audience, where it's someone that owns the tenant or is an IT admin, go to your IT admin and tell them this is a feature, because it does save a lot of time for both the admin and the end users. And this is the ability to create custom templates based on your organization. So I'm, of course, in Contoso. Contoso is the Microsoft demo environment. It's a fake Contoso demo environment because it's in our dog food ring. But what we have here is 4 templates that the IT admin created for all the end customers. And they're specific to the company. So it's like the Contoso recruitment, where it actually goes through and has the fields that are relevant to how my company does our recruitment process. And examples of this is, our company might have 1 interview date, but a lot of companies will have like 3 rounds of interviews. And so there'll be 3 dates. And so it's like the IT admin can make all of these custom templates so that the end user doesn't have to kind of like start from our recruitment tracker and then add all these edits to it. They can just have it work out of the box. Now, the feature that we are starting to roll out, I believe this one is in like 10% of first release right now, is the ability to actually package in Power Automate into these custom templates. So I know I have one set up. Let me see which one it is. It might be the inventory tracker. No. Let me try the candidate tracker. Yes, this one's it. So this is a candidate tracker that, again, my IT admin set up this template. This is not one that you guys will see in your tenant unless you're also at a company named Contoso and your IT admin built it. But what you'll have in here is you'll notice there's a workflow to monitor the list and notify the recruiter when a candidate's created. So that is using Power Automate. And as the end user in this scenario, I'm the end user, so I'm going to use this template in 365 Deep Dive. And when I create it, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to know the word flow. It just sets it up for me because it's built into this template that my org created for me.
And the data connections on the flow are to you, the creator?
Exactly.
Okay.
It will recognize me as the creator.
And I would be able to go to Power Automate and manage it?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And so here it says set up features, new candidate notification, the Power Automate flow monitors the candidate tracker. And again, this is something that the IT admin uses. They use the words that they want. They use everything that they want. And so it's super helpful. And so you can go ahead and hit next. And I haven't signed in on all of these. But when you're using not an account that's the dummy data account, then usually everybody's already signed in at that point, and you will see that the flow and everything is just set up.
Yep. So
that's really cool.
For the connection
exactly
in line. Okay.
And it's honestly it's kind of a lame demo because it just happens. And then you sit there and you're like, I promise you it just works.
But behind the scenes is like an IT admin. That's huge for doing like a lot of the heavy lifting for the user.
Yeah.
I mean, you just created a packaged solution. This is something that I would teach in a workshop at 365 EduCon. And now it's going to be basically pick from a template that the organization already has, and the Power Automate flow is already built in, and the data connections are right there, and it's deployed.
Here's the data connection setting up, and you see the check and the check, which we all know and love. And then you go ahead and hit next, setting up features for this list. And sometimes it takes like 2 to 3 minutes. We don't necessarily need to sit here and watch it, but it just configures it. And so, I think what you'll be teaching is how to make these org templates and how to set up that flow.
Yeah, how to enable it for your organization.
I've done it before. I'm not the best at it, but the woman on my team who created this feature, she just spits these out, right? Like she's sitting there and she's like, "Oh, you need a template? Cool. Here you go." And so I absolutely love that. I think it's such a powerful tool. And again, this is new. You won't see this in your tenant yet. We're in that very small start of the rollout. But I love kind of ending on that note because I show so many powerful things in lists, and I feel like sometimes I can see eyes glaze over where they're like, I don't even know how to get started. And we now have a way for people to get started where it's like, just use this template that will have all these features, and then if you need more, you can kind of figure out how to do more moving on.
I think that's really awesome. Lowering the bar to get started very quickly, minimizing the amount of work that has to be done, giving the ownership to it, to hire in the organization, and then democratizing it across it. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, there was one other thing that I wanted to to grab before we closed out, which was Phil's question earlier on about integration into Loop. And we've got a lot of List fans and a lot of Loop fans that watch our channel. And have there been any thoughts about the List being able to be like portable and moved out to a Loop workspace or something like that, so that he's kind of thinking the idea of like that kind of filling the need of like databases in Notion type of
Yeah.
A setup.
Super familiar with that ask. And I think that answering this question is a little bit tough without like pulling in the Loop team as well.
Sure.
Short answer is yes. We work very closely with the Loop team, and we think that there's so much opportunity for lists in the Loop atmosphere, ecosystem, maybe atmosphere. And the opportunity there is something that, we don't have anything that's like in a prototype stage to kind of show. And we do think that like, you look at like Notion and Quip and all these things that have this concept of, or like Coda, right? Where you like insert this table, and it is a SQL database. It's a very powerful tool, but also, like List, it has the beautiful front end to like manage a project. You don't need to have, engineering background to be able to use it. So we know that there's a space for this. We have not landed on, what the next step is there. But we are actively thinking about it. And, selfishly, I would love to be able to do like / list inside of my Loop and be able to just like quickly add in a list. But there's a lot of opportunity in that space. And so I'm kind of like using a bunch of words to say, yes, we're talking with them and we love that team. And we actually do a lot of like joint sessions sometimes. Like Loop folks will come to my List session and like hop on stage to show something that like a person might have a question about. So we absolutely try to work together as much as possible. There's nothing in the code yet to show, and we don't have like a crisp alignment on where we're going just yet.
Yeah. Cool. Well, something hopefully to look forward to.
Is there anything else that you wanted to mention here in closing from our list of lists?
Yes, the most meta thing here. So I think the only thing that I'll conclude with is kind of a call to action for you guys here. We have this button that's called our feedback button. I would say part of my full-time job is just reviewing what comes in.
So you have a list of feedback that you review for managing lists.
Yes. Yes. So if you report a bug that breaks the list with your feedback, it's chaos. No, I'm just kidding. We make sure it works. And that's a feedback tool where you can send a smile, you can send a frown, you can send a like, and we go through it. We have an entire team that can analyze that data for us, because I'll sometimes get 2,000 of those feedbacks a month, which, as you imagine, it's a little hard to do much with. But we have an entire team of people that then kind of take that and do some like smart training on the model. And it's just like fully divulge how our team works. We take that feedback and we kind of go through it. I'm kind of the first pass at like what seems to be the biggest issue. Is there actually a bug? Is it a feature ask? And we review it with our engineering team, like the actual software developers, to be like, what do we think about this? So if there's something that like you love or you hate, or you want a suggestion, or you're just thinking that you want to connect with the product team, this is really the best way to do it, because we do review these. And again, it's not just me, even though it's my ownership now. We have an entire team of people that own kind of this feedback pipeline, and they help set up kind of these training models so that if you feel like you're submitting a bunch of feedback and it's going into the kind of this like blank space, it's going into a model that we've been perfecting for the last 2 years to make sure that like the keywords that you use, the phrases that you use are captured and up leveled to me, so that as like the product owner, I'm able to do decisions and improve things. So really use that tool heavily, and I don't feel like it's going nowhere, because it is our job to look at it. That is, I would say, a huge part of my job.
Awesome. Well, thank you for providing that. Make sure, call to action, that you take advantage of that. Press the button and provide that feedback in Microsoft Lists. So we've covered a lot here today. I know I've had a blast. This has been really, really cool. We're at the top of the 2 hours, so we're going to bring it home. But this has been really awesome. I can't wait to actually go back and watch some of this, because there's been so much to cover. We're going to try maybe update this with chapters on the YouTube channel,
Yeah,
so
nice.
people can kind of jump through and get to a specific point. But keep the conversation going on YouTube in the comments section. I'm really interested to see some of the follow-up questions after people have had a chance to go back and watch this. And I know with all the innovation, we should probably try to get you on the show again in the future.
For sure. You going
There's
to
a lot happening in this space.
SharePoint conference?
I won't be there for the European SharePoint conference. I think the next one for me is actually going to be EduCon. 365 EduCon in Chicago, first week in November. That's the next one that I'm going to be at. And I know there's going to be a heavy presence of List there, because I'll be doing some workshops, and
cool.
We'll have a whole lot of List innovation going on there.
Yeah, I will not be there, but I mean, also we can do it virtually. I would love to come back on the show. This is so fun for me, and as I mentioned in the beginning, it gives me an opportunity to like really geek out on the stuff that I love. And I mean, I've stayed on this product for 7 years now, so like I love this stuff. Leave questions, find me on LinkedIn. Like I absolutely love talking about this.
Awesome.
So I would come back anytime.
We're going to take you up on that, because there were a few questions in the chat window we didn't quite get to, so there's going to be an opportunity for follow.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, thank
John,
you so much for your time, Michaela. I want to point everybody to the upper corner. I put Michaela's LinkedIn. If you want to scan that with your phone, it'll take you to her profile, so you can follow her. She's also has a Twitter. I don't know. Both of us are kind of getting way less active on Twitter lately, so I figured like LinkedIn might be the safest thing to share.
Yeah, my posts there haven't been getting really any traction. So I've been using LinkedIn.
Same.
Kind of where people are engaging the most. But yeah, I do have a Twitter as well. It's Microsoft Michaela.
Cool.
I have to update the byline to the maestro of Microsoft Lists.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
the Microsoft List magician.
Yeah, well, I hope we like busted some rumors and myths you might have heard about List. I thought this was a really fun topic. I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And just a shout out to 365 EduCon for providing us the space and supporting us in this. So hopefully we'll see you in a future episode. John, thanks for emceeing and joining us all the way from Kansas City. One day you will be sitting here next to us.
Yep. Hopefully we get to meet in person someday. One of these days. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, guys. Good luck with your sessions. Break a leg. I know you guys got to get running, so we'll wrap it up. Cool.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.